Tried to make me go to rehab. I said no.
129 people die every day in this country from a drug overdose.
Hey guys, welcome to Recovery Talk. My name is Holly, and today our co-host here is Vanessa. Me and Vanessa met in sober living about 4 years ago. She's a recovery advocate. She's on Facebook at Free to Be V. So that's Free to Be V. V as in Vanessa. She talks about her addiction and her recovery in her blog. I'm so grateful that you're here today to share some of your story. So if we can just get started, Vanessa, and if you just want to talk a little bit about your background of your addiction and also where you are today in your recovery.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa, and I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict. As far as my story goes, it started out I grew up with a very normal childhood. There was no, addiction in my home. There wasn't any abuse or neglect. Really just a happy, normal childhood. But I always kind of felt like there was something different. As far back as I can remember, I just remember feeling different. And I remember feeling alone, and I often isolated. So addictive behaviors for me sort of started out before the using actually did. My main drug of choice was alcohol. I started drinking when I was in high school, and it was normal drinking, peer pressure and just kind of wanting to fit in. And I remember the first time I drank, it just felt like this relief, I suddenly felt secure in myself and I had confidence and I sort of felt like I fit into the crowd. And so it's something I just continued to do. But I do remember that, from that first drink, I didn't drink like other people, I didn't drink like my friends drank. I drank to change my mood immediately. So from that first time I drank, I always drank to get drunk. And it was more binge drinking, obviously, on weekends and things like that at that point. But that sort of carried over into my college years. I went to college in Milwaukee at UWM, and I was often going out on weeknights when others would be studying. I was always sort of the one that wanted to go out and party. I didn't isolate at that point. I really was pretty social and always up for anything. I met the man who would be my husband when I was in college. We actually bartended together, and we moved out of the city of Milwaukee into a suburb. And suddenly I was not within walking distance of most of my friends who at the time were bartenders. And I started to feel really isolated. And that's when the drinking on my own started. I would buy bottles of wine and I would drink that. And it got to a point where my husband had actually brought it up a few times how much I was drinking. And so at that point I started hiding alcohol in our house. And that's where it sort of moved into a physical addiction. If I wasn't drinking, I was shaky, sweaty. I would go through withdrawals. Although at the time I didn't know that I was actually going through withdrawals. I didn't realize that that's what that was. I was already, physically dependent upon alcohol. I got pregnant when I was 26 and actually stopped drinking for my pregnancy. But right after I had my daughter, I got home and I just picked up right where I left off. And it got really bad after that. I had suffered some postpartum depression, and the drinking was the only thing that relieved it. But it was also the only thing that made me feel normal at that point. And so it kind of just escalated from there. I wasn't very present for my daughter at that point in my life because I was always focused on when I could get alcohol. I went to 6 detoxes. I was in residential treatment 3 times. I've been in outpatient treatment a handful of times. And recovery just never stuck for me. I just did not want to believe that I was an addict. I thought that if everyone would just kind of leave me alone and just let me figure it out on my own, that I would be fine, and that people were just trying to control my life by forcing me into all these treatments. It wasn't until after my final relapse. And, you know, Holly had talked about how we had lived together in sober living. Well, that worked for a few months until I got complacent. And I thought, you know, I bet if I just tried to drink again, I bet I'd be able to handle it now. Because now I know that I can't drink too much. You know, now I know how much I can drink and get away with it. Well, that lasted for about 24 hours, and I was kicked out of the sober living house, you know, not my proudest moment. Within 24 hours of that first drink, I lost my job, and I was kicked out of sober living, you know, and things sort of spiraled from there. I was doing just some really bad things. I was lying and hiding, and at the end of my active addiction, I actually ended up a missing person. I just left my parents' house one day, who I was staying with, because my husband had filed for divorce, and rightfully so. And I picked up and left, and I had no intention of ever coming back. Like, I chose the alcohol that day. And I got some dingy motel room, and I stayed there with my liquor and my pills, and I was waiting to die, basically. I was gone for 5 days. Friends had searched for me. The public was looking for me. Police were looking for me. And I was a pretty good addict at that time, so I knew not to use my credit cards. I paid for everything in cash, so there was no trace. I turned off my phone. And luckily, they found me before it was too late. And when the police found me on that 5th day, you know, I hadn't eaten in almost a week. I was frail. I could barely walk, just like a shell of a human being. And I was so mad that day that they found me, because I thought, you know, I can't even end my life right. You know, what is there left for me to live for? So I ended up being committed to a psychiatric hospital because I was a danger to myself. And I remember this is where it really changed for me, because I remember finally being able to get the energy up to walk down that hallway to call my daughter for the first time. It had been probably 10 days at that point since I talked to her, and she answered the phone and she said, "Mommy, I thought you didn't want to talk to me anymore." And that literally just completely broke my heart, and I couldn't ignore anymore the fact that my using was affecting others. You know, I always thought, I'm only hurting myself, I'm not hurting anyone else. But to hear my 4-year-old daughter and hear her heart breaking, it just tore me to pieces. And that was the day where I decided, you know, I made a decision that I was going to have to recover. There was just no other option for me. And the only way I knew how to do that at that point was to go to meetings and peer support and talk with other addicts. You know, the doctors and counselors, sure, they tried to help me, but that's not where I found the help that I needed. I found the help that I needed from others who had gone through it too. And I sort of fell to my knees to some of the women who had been trying to help me all along. And I just asked them to please, you know, just teach me how to live. I'll do whatever I can. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I've been doing that now for close to 3 years. I'll celebrate 3 years clean in October.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing. So I have a few questions. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming here and coming over to share your story. It's definitely not easy to share your story or talk about what your addiction has brought you or the places where you've been. When you talk about that stuff, I was just getting goosebumps and thinking about when you're talking about your daughter and just to see where you are now. You know, it's a really big accomplishment. So I have a few questions here. What would you say is your biggest struggle in recovery?
My biggest struggle today is complacency. You know, when I first came into recovery, I was just desperate to live. You know, I didn't want to die. And so if you told me to go to 2 meetings a day, every day for 90 days, I was going to do it. Now that I've got some time under my belt, you know, I'm not as concerned about the using as I once was. You know, there was a time in my early recovery where I couldn't even leave my house because I was so afraid of what might happen. Like, I couldn't predict my next movement at that point. That's not who I am today. I don't have that fear all the time anymore, but I do get it. And it's normally when I get complacent, when I decide that I'm too tired to reach out to other people in recovery, or, you know, I've gone nearly 3 years now without doing it. So maybe I can probably, you know, I don't really need all this stuff anymore. My daughter, I'm taking her to swimming lessons and soccer practice and all these things. Then you know, when I start to put those things before my recovery, that's when I start to see myself not so much go into behaviors where I feel like I might use again, but it's all these other behaviors, these addictive behaviors that come back, you know, the impulses and the irritability and the lonely feeling, or just like depressed, you know, like feeling lazy. And so that's when I know I need to get back into the things that have helped me all along. I also find that things that like I prayed for 3 years ago start feeling like burdens in my life. You know, there was a time when I couldn't even be there to put my daughter to sleep at night, and I couldn't even get up in the morning and take a shower. I wasn't capable of working, you know. So when I find myself in a place where I'm all of a sudden annoyed that I have to go to work, I should be grateful for that job and the ability to go to work. When I'm feeling stressed out and overwhelmed at home with my daughter, and, you know, my husband and I are still married, that's a blessing. And then I get busy with my daughter, and I have to remind myself that because of recovery, I get to be a mother today. I get to be a good mother. And I get to be there for her during all the ups and the downs in life.
Just being present.
Yeah, just
being able to be there.
You know, I might have been in that house with her when she was younger, but I wasn't present. You know, I was always preoccupied. And getting to wake her up every morning and put her to bed at night. And I was laughing about this last night with some people in recovery. And, you know, she might get out of bed at night 10 times before she actually falls asleep. But I'm there to get her and scoot her back into bed. There was a time when I couldn't do that, you know. And that's a blessing. You know, there are a lot of women in recovery who have had their children taken away. And they pray to be able to go put their kids to bed at night. You know, and so the fact that I get to do it, and I sometimes take it for granted, you know, I need to remind myself of these things, you know, that these
are blessings. Things
are in my life today because I'm sober, and not because I'm being tested or something like that.
And some of those women, they'll never be able to get the chance to put their children to sleep because of the choices they made along the way,
right?
Where their addiction brought them. What would you say is your biggest accomplishment from being in recovery?
Oh, man. I mean, there are so many things that have happened since I chose recovery in my life. When I first came in, I was up to my eyeballs in legal consequences, and I never thought I would ever make it through court and all of those things.
And you
sober.
had the bracelet?
And I had the bracelet, and I had a breathalyzer in my car, and, you know, I could have felt like that was a punishment and used it as an excuse, but those things saved my life. They taught me how to hold myself accountable. You know, I started sharing my writing online, and got a huge response from people just reaching out saying, you know, I've been there too. You know, I have family that struggles with this, so I've been able to sort of be a shoulder for some people to cry on or just to vent to. I've been promoted at work. I work in the mortgage industry. It's, you know, busy, stressful job sometimes, and the fact that I was recognized and able to get promoted, I mean, that's huge for me. I never even thought, there was a point in my life where I didn't think I would live this long, you know, so just to be successful at work is huge. But I mean, my biggest accomplishment, obviously, is being a mom today. I mean, it's just, I get goosebumps thinking about it because she just brings so much joy to my life. And I can't believe that I would have missed this. You know, had I continued on the path that I was going, I would have died.